Yes. The answer is yes. You clicked on the video, you read the title, there's your answer. Analog horror is pretty fucking scary. But there's more to it than that, of course. Like, why is it scary, or how is it scary? And why every corner I turn, there's a new one. Analog horror has been popularized in recent years, especially with the Backrooms, Mandela Catalog, and etc. But it didn't start then. There's others like Local 58, No Through Road, and probably some others, but I didn't research that much. So what makes analog horror really scary? Well, mostly it's on an old recording camera or a VHS tape. VHS plays a huge part in analog horror since it just has this certain feel to it. Whenever you see a VHS overlay with some spooky images, it's pretty scary shit. I've just recently started to watch more analog horror and I can assure you it's really cool. There's a certain way to make it though, like Kane Pixels and Alex Kister, which he's in some drama right now. Also, I'm not going over the Backrooms or the Mandela Catalog. It's great, but everybody already knows what the hell it is, so yeah. I love analog horror and hopefully you do too, and if you don't, then why did you click on this video? I don't understand. The Walten Files is probably a VHS horror franchise you've heard of before. It's been going around the internet for a while. I'd say this is probably my second favorite VHS horror series, since although it has similarities to FNAF, it's different in a lot of aspects. There's animatronics. Oh, shit, FNAF has that. Okay, well, there's people getting stuffed into suits. Oh, okay, FNAF has that too. Okay. It has its own arcade games. Fuck, FNAF has that too. I know I'm making fun of how similar it is to FNAF, but seriously, it is different in its own ways. I also like how this series elaborates on certain elements. It's not all confusing. Like, if you spend even 5 minutes trying to understand it, you probably could. This series isn't, scared to kill some kids too. The first episode is an amazing introduction into the series, since not only does it give you some spooks, it gives you some great story, which I guess we'll go ahead and talk about the story, so strap in, this might take a while. Before I even say anything, just know there are spoilers ahead and a trigger warning, so if you're a pussy, then click off. Two men named Felix Kranken and Jack Walten, that's the name of the series, created the restaurant known as Bond's Burgers. But it wasn't like any other burger joint. It had animatronics, to bring the children in, which I don't know how the fuck these entertain kids. I mean, like, if I saw this shit as a kid, there'd be shit and piss running down my leg, and maybe even some blood. Bond's Burgers eventually led to the company called Bunny Smiles Incorporation being created. A month before the restaurant opened, he took Jack's two younger children and they went to a school party which had alcoholic drinks. And if you don't know somehow, that isn't legal. So Felix got extremely drunk even though he was already dealing with a drinking problem. And after all this, they all eventually drove home safely. Just kidding. Felix crashed the car and killed both of Jack's kids. That's gotta hurt, man. Jack was of course angry as all hell, so he just disappeared. Then they held their first day of operation, and already an employee noticed something weird about the main animatronic Bond. When everything closes, she eventually fixes up Bond and goes home to her loving family. Just kidding again, she fucking dies too. Bond mutilated her to death, so that's cool, I think, I don't know. If you haven't noticed, there's never a good ending to this type of shit. Two more people were killed and stuffed into suits. They were named Charles and Rosemary. The restaurant didn't last too long since, 4 people fucking died, so they closed the restaurant on October 31st, 1974. Felix, after all this, would eventually make his own storage facility and start experimenting with his own stuff. Wait a second, I'm noticing some similarities here. Yes, Felix and Purple Guy are very similar figures, I know, but anyway, we're talking about the Walten Files here, not FNAF. Since Jack has perished, the police decided to search his house in hopes of finding something. 3 years later. Basically, they didn't find too much. It was what you'd imagine an abandoned house to be like. Run down walls, black mold, dirty floors, you get the drill. Eventually, they explored the storage facility and smelled a gut-wrenching smell. Can you guess what that is? A. Moldy food. B. Sunshine and rainbows. Or C. Nikocado Avocado's asshole. If you guessed any of those, you were wrong. It was D. A dead fucking body. Or a dead body in a suit. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Eventually, a new caretaker of the facility was put into place. This fella was named Brian. He didn't last too long though, since Bond eventually killed him too. After all this shit happened, Sophie Walten would find an old arcade game produced by Bunny Smiles Incorporated. It would eventually lead to more questions than answers, so we all know how that played out. Whew, okay, that was a lot, even I'm already tired. There's probably more to this story, but there's other VHS horror series we gotta talk about. I will have to admit though, it was kinda sad when I heard Jack yell for his kids to be okay, so that's one for you, Walten Files. Keep track on the scoreboard. The Walten Files does a great job scaring the shit out of people with the art, which might I add, the art is fucking amazing. Same with all the voice acting, basically everything was perfect. The Walten Files started about 3 years ago when VHS horror was starting to take off, and yeah, it has some of the cliches, loud sound with spooky images or long pauses, but it pulls it off well. I think it's a great piece of art though, so with saying all that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic, Vita Carnis. Now, Vita Carnis is my absolute favorite VHS horror series of all time. The concept of it is so cool, like these meat-like creatures just walking around. They can do a lot of shit too, especially the mimic creature, which we'll get into later. VHS horror might not be seen as scary, but when you're in a room by yourself at 2 a.m., yes, it is pretty fucking scary. The best explanation I can give for this series is it's basically living meat, which is what Vita Carnis translates to. Anyways, I suppose let's get on with this story. Around World War II, these creatures started to roam the earth, notably killing people in the sewers of Germany. The meat-like creatures mainly eat humans or something like that, so basically we're fucked. Except for the meat snakes and the crawl though, which don't eat live humans, they just feed on dead humans, so I guess that's better. Speaking of the crawl and the meat snake, why don't we talk about the fucked up creatures of this series? Okay, let's get through them real quick. You have the crawl, trimmings, meat snake, mimics, harvesters, hosts, monoliths, and something called the singularity. First up, you have the crawl, which is like a vine, but it's made out of basically the same stuff as our veins and body are, so think of it like a meat vine. It can be used as compost, and you can supposedly make food from it. That looks worse than some of the frozen foods you find at Dollar General, which, might I add, some of those are disgusting. Now, the trimmings can actually grow off of the crawl and become their own mammal thing? I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what the hell these are, but it's cool, I guess. Trimmings are basically like a dog, but without skin. Okay, look, I know that sounds horrible, but it's the best way I can describe them. Some people keep them as pets. First off, why? Moving on, you got the meat snake, which isn't harmful really to humans, again, unless you're dead, so sorry. Now, what's cool about these creatures is that their skull changes or can change based on the species they eat. Like, imagine a wolf eating a panther, then it gains the skull of a panther. That's cool, right? Or I'm just weird, but it's cool, okay? Now, the mimics is the big creepy thing of this entire series. It looks like a human, but it isn't. It can shapeshift into humans, even copy their voices. I mean, the name is, you know, mimic. Or they hide in furniture, which I don't know how they do that, but they do. And the more they eat humans, the more they start to slowly look like a human. So your mom or dad could be a mimic and then just one day eat you. Isn't that just awesome? They're pretty creepy sons of bitches though. Harvesters are basically just big balls made out of meat and flesh that act like one of those flower trap things. They stay underground until someone or something walks above them. Then they proceed to spring up and get you. They inject you with a type of substance, so basically heroin, but 100 times worse. Hosts are kind of like the mimic, but not really. They also look like a human, but they bury themselves in the ground, kind of like the harvester. When they strike, they release spores that are supposed to hypnotize anything that breathes that in. If you're confused, don't worry. It's fully understandable. Never mind. How the fuck does all this work? Now, monoliths are tall-ass giants, so think of the BFG. They don't really do anything. They just kind of stand there and be tall, I guess. Last but not least, you have the singularity, which I don't fully understand yet, but I'll try and explain it. It's just a ball of black, kind of like a black hole in a way, that has control over all these species. It interferes with electrical wires, but other than that, nothing is really known about it. Oh, fuck. I have a bunch of questions. First, how the fuck does a ball of darkness control all of these creatures? How do mimics supposedly hide in furniture? Why do the monoliths even exist? Why does any of this exist? And that's where I'm stumped. Listen, if I were game theory, I'd try to dig in more, but I'm just a guy that explains stuff and is funny. So that's all I got about Vita Carnis. Or I'm not funny. I don't know. You be the judge of that. Overall, again, it's a cool concept, and all the live action footage looks pretty good. Again, it has its cliches, but it works some of the time. I love Vita Carnis, and I'm very excited to see what else it has in store in this, VHS horror series. Now, instead of talking about walking raw meat basically, let's talk about something a little bit more close to home. FNAF VHS. I know there's more FNAF VHS stuff rather than Baddingtons and Squimpus McGrimpuses, but they're kind of what started the FNAF VHS shit, or what got it popular, so I'll mainly be talking about their stuff. We all know the story of FNAF, so I don't want to repeat anything too much. You should go watch my video on FNAF if you don't understand. But basically, a guy killed a lot of kids, tried to get away with it, he didn't, so then he got inside of an animatronic suit and was left to rot. But there's a twist, he didn't die, he just kind of died, and then he chilled there until someone quote-unquote awakened him. That's the main story, but the VHS stuff has its own little things added into the story. It's all basically found footage shit, working on the animatronics, people having fun, the animatronics murdering people in cold blood, the usual. I do like how it is different from the games though, and it doesn't follow the exact story, and in my opinion, it makes the animatronics and stuff way more scary than they were in the games. It makes it feel like more real. I remember the first one I watched was the sound response check, and whenever that first came out, it did in fact scare the absolute shit out of me, and it still kinda does. It's probably just because I'm a pussy, so take of that what you will, but trust me, it is pretty scary whenever you watch it by yourself. I don't have too much to add to FNAF VHS since it's just FNAF but in a VHS style. I'm not saying it's not cool though, it's pretty fucking sick if I do say so myself. Okay, now the last VHS horror shit we'll talk about is Local 58. One of the first popular VHS horror series. It's kind of like a news station that occasionally goes into these live action segments. I don't know the whole story, but all I know is that you can't look at windows or something like that. Local 58 isn't really scary, I'd say it's more just disturbing, which all of these are of course disturbing, but you know what I mean. The main storyline is this news station just keeps getting hijacked multiple times. Supposedly the moon has something to do with it, with a shot of the moon while screaming is heard in the background. I don't really get it, but it is cool. Like, is everyone werewolves? Do they just become evil on a full moon? Or are they furries that want to become werewolves? Or do they just not go outside like me? I don't really know. Main thing to get from Local 58, if I could summarize it, is that it's a haunted news station. Basically, imagine if Tucker Carlson smiled for once on Fox News. That's when you know something's wrong. Overall, VHS horror is a great type of horror, especially if you want disturbing shit to watch. I am glad it's popular though, because it's always fun to have a new VHS horror series, but sometimes it seems like it's overdone in a way. Don't kill me please, this is just my opinion. No, but seriously, some VHS horror series that I researched for this video just seems like put together really quickly in about a day. No story, just trying to be scary, which can work, but like, well, no, never mind, maybe it can't work. VHS horror is great, but I don't really know how hard it is to make one, so you know what? I'm gonna try to make my own.
Holy fuck, is that Christian?